Good afternoon, Your Highnesses, Excellencies and Dignitaries, members of the ABLF network, and all of our wonderful guests here with us today. My name is Resham Katecha. I'm a strategy and policy specialist based in the UK, and as ever, I am delighted to be here with you all at the ABLF Conclave. I'm delighted to introduce the exceptional guest today, Micheal Garin, who is a highly respected media industry executive for more than 40 years. He was appointed CEO of Twofour54 Abu Dhabi, the Emirates media and entertainment hub, in January last year. Of course, a challenging time to be in post, but he's done marvels with the role. As CEO, he leads the Twofour54 team in facilitating a vibrant ecosystem of local and global partners that enables and inspires the most creative and innovative content. Today, more than 500 media companies from around the world, including CNN, Sky News Arabia, and Ubisoft, call Twofour54 home. Micheal has had a hand in producing everything from Dallas to the Oscar-winning rock climbing documentary Free Solo. So thank you so much for joining us today, Micheal. You took over at a very challenging time. We obviously didn't know it last January, but you were about to enter as CEO into a pandemic. So what have been the major challenges to the local media ecosystem due to the pandemic?
Well, there are quite a few. In addition to being CEO of Twofour54, I have been for now 12 years also the CEO of Imagination. And it really made no sense to have these two organizations disconnected to each other. But finally, we're getting the media and entertainment sector properly organized, and we've now fused them. So Imagination is really the content creation entity, and Twofour54 is there to make sure that the infrastructure exists for everybody to utilize and in order to create content. So I would say the two main challenges we faced were, number one, a challenge faced by everybody around the world, which was how to maintain production during a pandemic. And I am happy to say that we are only one of two jurisdictions in the world, the other being Iceland, who managed to maintain production throughout the pandemic, well over $100 million of film and television production. And that is a function that really begins, and you can say almost begins and ends, with the quality of the leadership here, the dedication they have to the safety and security of the people here. And when I say the people, I mean all people, UAE nationals and residents, tourists, guests, everyone. And as a result, we were able to maintain production throughout the pandemic, which obviously is still going on. January, February of this year, we were fortunate enough to have Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible shooting. And one day, one of the last days, if not the last day of shooting, we had over 1,000 people on the set and not a single case of COVID. So we have been able to put in place protocols, procedures that start before people enter the country and continue until they leave. So that was one challenge that we've met very well. And it also represents to me one of the many, many things I love about being in Abu Dhabi and the UAE, which is not only the quality of the leadership, but the quality of the people here. I've been saying in very frustrated terms to my friends all over the world that we have a cure for this pandemic. It's called personal responsibility. Nobody's exercising it. I was in Paris. I'm originally, as you might tell from my accent, from New York. You're in London. Mm-hmm. You see people like nothing's wrong. And meanwhile, they're putting their families and their colleagues into ICU units because they're transmitting the disease. You don't see that here. You see social distancing, you see discipline, mask wearing, people washing and sanitizing their hands. We now have over 90% of our population vaccinated. So this is a place where things work because there's a consensus between the leadership and the led. And that has helped us enormously to build the ecosystem, but more importantly, to keep it functioning throughout the pandemic. On the infrastructure side, it was very interesting because we were in the process of building a major new campus that will be really the magnet for taking this industry to an entirely different level on Yas Island. It's called the Yas Creative Hub. And this was years in the planning, and construction is a very long-term nature in terms of building, planning, building, and then obviously utilization. And so when the pandemic hit, the architecture and the structure were not only planned but under construction.
That's so fascinating.
Fortunately, the interiors had not yet begun to be constructed. And that enabled us to completely reimagine the interiors and therefore design the offices of tomorrow instead of the offices of yesterday. And so, because our mission is to build an ecosystem, we're not commercial landlords, we were able to design spaces to accommodate people the way that they're going to work tomorrow, which is having a lot of common space that can be shared on an a la carte basis, like screening rooms, conference rooms. You know, before people had these lavish offices and they had empty conference rooms sitting there all the time. And now they would have a lot of empty offices as well, because I think in the future, a lot of people are going to be working from home because they've demonstrated they're able to do their jobs and improve their quality of life, and often improve the quality of their work all at the same time. And so we are not forcing people to take space that will no longer be used. But that's also been great for us because the demand for the creative hub has been so overwhelming by reducing the space requirements of individual companies. We're able to accommodate more companies. And so in a funny way, the pandemic has, Abu Dhabi and the UAE it benefited in many ways from the pandemic because it's demonstrated its ability to rise and address the occasion.
That's fascinating. Thank you, Michael. And I know that you've mentioned the pandemic in some ways with everybody stuck at home, especially in lockdowns, the many lockdowns we've had around the world, that people's viewing habits have meant that they've actually been looking for new content, and that's actually opened up people's willingness to try out different content. So what impact has that had for you, and has that meant that you've gained a wider audience?
Well, that's a great question, but I'm going to answer a slightly a variation on that question, because a lot has changed, but it really hasn't been changed by the pandemic as much as it's been changed by the arrival of all these OTT services like Netflix and Amazon, Stars Play, and others, because people want two things from their entertainment. They want to be entertained, that goes without saying. But when they're watching local content, they all want cultural authenticity. And for too long, especially in this part of the world, people were willing to compromise on quality of production and the quality of the content because that was the only way they could get cultural authenticity. Mm-hmm. But when Netflix arrived, and you could see films from Korea, from Argentina, and from Mexico, everywhere in the world, audiences understood that compromises were not necessary to make, that places all over the world could deliver both cultural authenticity as well as high quality content. And they demanded the same at home. And that was the great thing for us, because up until then, we were, I would say it was push from the part of Imagination and Twofour54 to encourage people to elevate the quality of what they did. But with the arrival of Netflix and all these other streaming services, all of a sudden it was pull. The audiences were demanding this. And the various services respond a lot better to audiences than they do to me and my colleagues. And so all of a sudden, whether it was Netflix or Amazon or NBC or Stars Play, they came to us because for decades, some of them were trying on their own to develop content. They didn't want to, create mediocre content, but they were, and they kind of ultimately recognized, as their audiences did, that it was somewhat mediocre. But these are commercial enterprises, so if audiences were watching it, what incentive did they had to change? But now that audiences were demanding different things, of course they had an imperative to change, and so they came to us to help them do that. And I would say that has been probably the single most important factor. What the pandemic effect has been is that not so much audiences here are discovering new content, but audiences around the world are discovering Arab language content that they never before thought to even sample. So Zinzana, Justice, an Egyptian series that's on the air now, I'm sorry, I forget its name, are all highly popular around the world. And for the first time, audiences can see content from this region that not only are compelling viewing, but also meet their expectations for quality of production.
Well, that's fantastic, both for diversity and authenticity. And of course, you highlighted that OTT, these on-demand streaming services, have been, the big trend of the last five or so years. What do you see as the next great trend for the industry?
Well, the trend is really a continuation of something that began a while ago, which is the general transition from the linear to the digital. This has had a profound effect on life, not just on our industry. The ability to Google information, the ability to pick up your phone and not only make phone calls, but use it as a computer, and so our life, the whole digital revolution has changed our lives immeasurably. But in our world, it's also the change is profound because it is changing the way that production is done. Before, you had to go to Paris to shoot a scene that looked like it was in Paris. Now you can do it on a virtual production stage. And this is critically important to us because up until now, most people came to Abu Dhabi really for two reasons. We have one of the most robust rebate systems. So there's financial attractions to come here to produce, but also more often than not, they were coming here for locations. We're in the process of building a state-of-the-art studio city that will have numerous virtual production stages, very large sound stages for major Hollywood and Bollywood productions. And critically, this means that in a part of the world where we're able to produce only maybe 6 months of the year because of the heat. Now all of a sudden we'll be able to produce 12 months of the year because we'll be indoors in sound stages, and it will look like we're in Paris or in Singapore or in London or anywhere in the world. And so while Mission Impossible 7 was here to take advantage of our locations, Mission Impossible 8, we hope will be here because of the state-of-the-art studio facilities that we'll be offering.
And you've spoken about some of the steps that you're taking or that are being taken both by Twofour54 and Abu Dhabi overall to make the entertainment industry as attractive as possible. What are you doing? What's Twofour54 doing to make the entertainment industry inclusive, sustainable, and diverse?
Nothing. We don't have to do anything because that is the absolute definition of what Abu Dhabi and the UAE are. We have 220 nationalities living here side by side. The countries may be at war, but they're living in peace. 60% of our college graduates are women. 60% of our staff are Emirati. I'm just guessing, but I'd say a majority of them are women. So this is just life here in the UAE. What people need to pass laws and quotas to achieve in the rest of the world, we're just achieving organically because tolerance is just part of our DNA here.
Wow, that answer went a totally different way to what I was expecting when I first heard you say nothing. So then tell me, what do you think some of the roadblocks are that are holding the industry back from reaching its full potential, and what could be done to circumvent them?
Yeah, well, in the United States and the UK and India and China, the major production centers around the world, this industry is, in some places over 100 years old. In our part of the world, it's in a young, we have very young countries. We're just going to celebrate our 50th anniversary as a country in December. We don't have the infrastructure in place, not the physical infrastructure, but the organizational infrastructure in place for people to grow and develop in their careers the way that they do in the more developed production centers around the world. We have all these famous stories about Barry Diller and Ari Emanuel and David Geffen starting in the William Morris mailroom. Well, if you don't have a William Morris, you don't have a William Morris mailroom, and finding, the opportunities to provide entry-level opportunities that train people for the way that this business is done around the world. It's very hard for individuals to understand how difficult this business is unless you're in it and see it. And so, everybody says, "Oh, I had that idea. I could have done that." But it's a very tough business, as every other business when you get to look inside, ultimately is. There's a reason that we only have a few 3-star chefs, and there's only a reason that we have a few great novelists, and there's to do things to a high standard, whatever it is very challenging. And one of the ways that I was able to convince people here to allow us to train people properly was to say, look, we want to have Emirati pilots. That's a goal. But you're not going to get into a plane piloted by somebody because they're Emirati. You're going to get into a plane because it's piloted by somebody who's qualified to fly and went through rigorous training to sit in that seat.
Of course.
Well, our industry is no different. It's just, requires different training, different experiences, but it's just as demanding. And that sort of analogy allowed people to, allowed us to avoid social promotion, to avoid giving people free hands to do things when that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And now we are at a stage, because it's 10 years, 11 years after I came to Image Nation. I've been in Abu Dhabi for 15. We're seeing the fruits of that very disciplined process, because now we have people who are directing features. We have one superstar, young Emirati director, who hopefully soon will be directing an American feature, obviously hired not because he's Emirati, but because of his talent. And so I'm very, very optimistic about the future, not only because of this process, but also because of what we were talking about a few minutes ago, is the impact that the digital world has had. Because the other thing that we're seeing is the merger and integration of the digital with the physical. Just think about this interview. You're in London, I'm here. A while ago, we would have waited till we were in the same room to have this kind of a conversation.
Absolutely.
So the world is changing, but Mohammed Al-Mubarak, our chairman, has said many times that film and television has taken Abu Dhabi to where it is, but digital and gaming will take us to where we want to be. And that is probably the most important new development that is impacting our ecosystem, because we brought Unity. For those of you who don't know who Unity is, when you turn on your computer, it's powered either by Apple or Microsoft. When you make a phone call, your phone is either Android phone or a Macintosh or an Apple phone. But over 90% of all games and virtual reality application is powered by Unity. So Unity announced last fall that they were making Abu Dhabi the headquarters, not only for the whole MENA region, but for all of Africa, all the way down to Cape Town. And that has meant that their curricula has been integrated into our school system from first grade all the way through postgraduate education. They also certify people who work in the profession all around the world. So their certification programs will be based here. Their annual hackathons and other events will be here. And because Unity is here, it's already been a magnet for almost 30 companies to come. And this creates jobs. And unlike the film business, these are jobs for which people are already trained, because young people are studying this in the UAE universities and high schools, and they're developing their own games. And now, unlike the film and television infrastructure, I mentioned there's no William Morris, there's no William Morris mailroom, there is a Unity, there is Ubisoft. So Ubisoft's been here for over 10 years already. So our future is really a digital future, and because film and television is very much of a regional nature, what's really going to change, and what is most exciting to me, is that we've always said that we're the creative hub for the Arab-speaking world, but in digital and esports, Abu Dhabi will be a global hub, comparing itself in a couple of years to Singapore and other places that'll come to as a big surprise to people, but it's not a surprise to people here, because first of all, this is part of the world, like 50% of the people are under the age of 26.
Wow.
I think the average is like 2 or 3 mobile phones per person. So, this is one of the most digitally sophisticated and switched on places in the world, but it's also incredibly young. And so they fit into the demographic, both as consumers and creators of digital content.
And so when we talk about young people, and obviously you've shared some statistics that show how the youth, the future in Abu Dhabi are really up and coming in terms of the gaming industry. What are some of the specific initiatives for upskilling youth that you've implemented in the last year, and what plans do you have going forward for really making sure that that young population are ready to really turbocharge the industry in Abu Dhabi?
Right. Well, they're ready. The question is, are they willing to submit themselves to the rigor that success in any industry really requires? I jokingly say often, maybe some people think too often, that the best training I've had for my role here is raising 3 boys, learning this and learning how to say no and to, be loving but strict. But this is really a very important point that I've made several times, but I want to reiterate it once again. Our industries are just as demanding as, whether you can't be an accountant without having gone through, financial training. You can't be a pilot without going through flight training. You can't be a scientist without the rigorous education that precedes you, stepping into the laboratory. And our industry is no different. The problem is that people are lying in bed watching television, and they have a different relationship with the industry than most people. You're not lying in bed when you're flying a plane. You're not lying in bed when you're, balancing. Doing balance sheets. So people just think about our industry in a very different way. And this, oh yeah, I had that thought, which I mentioned earlier, reaction is, very, very common in most people. But the fact that you can think of an idea doesn't mean you can translate it to the screen. So, I think the potential obstacle, and this is more a challenge, I would say, for the region than it is for Abu Dhabi, because as I say, we have 10 years of trying to do it right. But Saudi, for example, which is just entering and trying to bring their industry into the 21st century, is going to have a very tough time, because politically, saying no is not necessarily an easy thing. And you need to have people with the confidence to know when people are going above them and complaining, that how can this expat, treat me this way, or this is our money, I'm entitled to it, I should be getting it. It takes a certain political will of the leadership to say, well, wait a minute, this is, no, you're not entitled to this. Just as like you're not entitled to get in the cockpit of Emirates or Etihad Airways and fly off on the plane. So we have all these programs in place. We have an incredibly well-educated, very eager, ambitious youth. And honestly, the challenges that I just described, that I think places like Saudi are going to be dealing with for a very long time, don't exist here. The big change that's happened here, I would say, is that 10 years ago when I came here, my biggest concern was that we were training people for jobs that didn't exist. And that's cruel. There's nothing crueler than to train people, young people, have them all accomplished and then have no jobs for them to, pursue. But now, both in the digital world and in the traditional film and television world, I can look somebody in the eye and say, if you're properly trained, you can have a career here and not look at this as a hobby, but earn the same kind of living that your friends and colleagues who work for the government and do other things. But for my money, you can have a much better time because 54 years of working, I couldn't think of a better industry to work in. I really have had a wonderful experience, because ultimately when you think about what we do and consider the content, it's not just the process, but just think about it, whether it's a film, a documentary, we touch everything in the world, and very few other industries do that. So I think the media and entertainment industry in Abu Dhabi and the UAE has a brilliant future ahead of it.
Sounds like it does. And I just want to pick up on that. You mentioned 54 years. You've obviously had a very long and successful career. So other than the three boys and the getting out of bed and the resilience, what are your secrets to running a clearly highly successful media firm?
I started a company with a couple of other people in 1978 that went public in 1980. So I've been running companies for now 41 years. And I think that the role of a CEO is actually very simple. There are only a few elements that you need to get right. You need to find the right people. You need to create the right culture. You need to create, you need to empower them and make them believe they're empowered, because you can't fool people. They either, have the authority to act or they don't. And you have to make sure they have the resources and then get out of the way. I think that when I came to Twofour54, my task was actually a lot simpler than I expected it to be, because I was very pleasantly surprised to see how full of talented people Twofour54 was. But they functioned like a government organization. So really, my task at Twofour54 when I arrived here was quite simple, which is change it from a government organization to a entertainment organization. And everybody was willing to, but they also didn't know exactly what that meant. So you had to sort of curate the culture, and also this is part of the world where failure is not tolerated, and our industry is an industry of failure. The most successful Hollywood studio, about 16% of scripts that are developed ever go into production. That means 84% never make it. But if you don't develop that 100% of scripts, you're not going to get the 16 that ultimately are made. Pilots that are produced for television networks, not very many of them get picked up. If you don't want to fail, I've got a simple solution for you: don't make any pilots. But if you want to succeed in our industry, you have to be prepared to fail. And that's counterintuitive to this part of the world. So part of the thing that I had to do when I came to Indigenation 12 years ago was make it a place that was safe to film. And then because people at 2454 had 12 years of watching Imagination, when I told them this is how we were going to function here, I came with a lot of credibility, and the transition was a lot more rapid and a lot easier to accomplish.
Well, thank you so much for those pearls of wisdom. I feel as though we've got many future media moguls watching, eagerly soaking up all that information. I wish we could keep you for longer, but I'm afraid we've reached the end of our session. So Micheal, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your knowledge, and all the fascinating work you're doing. It's been a real privilege speaking to you. To our wonderful audience, if you've got thoughts, comments, questions, please do post on our live social media wall with the hashtag ABLF City. And remember that if you missed a part of this session with the brilliant Micheal Garin or any other sessions, you can come back here at the end of today and view it on demand anytime from this evening. Thank you for joining us today, and remember that we are back every month featuring global leaders in powerful conversations.